Look, my friends, is Caine coming back at the end of the digital circus or not? There's a leak about this, and man, since this could be a spoiler, let me warn you right away that this video might ruin the ending of the circus or not. Because I'm not sure if it's real or not, since the sources end up being very conflicting, but we have this theory that Caine should come back for the end of the circus. And now we have to discuss this because there are leaked images and synopses out there that suggest this is really possible. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about here now, alright? And I warned you there might be possible spoilers. Here we go. Caine ended up disappearing at the end of the last episode. His disappearance was completely emblematic after he started freaking out and attacking everyone. But the question is, man, was he really erased? Did he really disappear? This is something that a lot of people were upset about because he just vanished without any effect or anything. And the supposed leak about him comes from this poster right here. The creator herself has even said that everyone who goes to the movies should look at this little post, this little lamp. She said it was very prominent and in fact quite far from everything and everyone. The thing is, this lamp is, in a way, an incomplete version because it seems that some posters will be released with an updated version of this artwork. Why am I talking about this? Because some theaters managed to leak a different poster, which is this one. This is the poster you already know very well, okay? And the thing about it is that it's kind of weird. Why? When you look at the lamp, you find a new character showing up here. And this character is a bee. This bee isn't here alone. There's a little hat behind it. I know the resolution is really bad, but man, this bee has already appeared in the series over several episodes. And then comes the question, what is this bee? What is it? Is it an NPC? Why is there an NPC inside the circus if the circus is already collapsing? Well, this bee here was actually drawn by Caine, and Caine was always fascinated by bees. Actually, if we even look at the source material to reference that book, I have no mouth and I must scream. We notice that Yen, who practically dominates everyone, she's fascinated by bees because bees are creatures that shouldn't be able to fly, but they manage to fly. They do something that technically would be impossible. Then comes this question. Caine in the digital circus is the same way. When I posted this here in the community tab, people kind of freaked out. Why? We saw here, for example, Caine always drawing some things, and several of the drawings always involved a figure of a bee. Not just him, but there was also Bubbles' bee form as well. This here, man, is a fascination of his because he really must like the figure of the bee a lot, and the bee is going to be a very important detail for him. But then comes the question, man, why would he come back as a bee? The digital circus should already be collapsing, and here's where a theory comes in. Maybe right after the circus collapsed, the members of the circus, along with Kingo, would probably try to bring Caine back because at some point they'll realize that this is already the end. In fact, it's the end of everything. They have nowhere else to go. And why am I saying this? Because they would try to bring Caine back. Because man, with Caine, it's much safer than living without him. But they would try to bring him back with limitations so he wouldn't manipulate other people's lives or create dangerous adventures. Actually, they would make him an NPC so he could interact with everyone. He would be more like a companion, like a helper, just like the bubble was for him, So that's how he would come back. It would be a smart way, but this wouldn't save anyone. I'm saying this because supposedly a synopsis leaked. Here's where there's a possibly more sinister leak, but I don't believe it's real. I'll say it right away, I think it's fake. But it's good to talk with you guys because every theory is valid. The synopsis that some theaters ended up releasing is this one. The sixth finale, the circus is falling apart. As Kaine's code disintegrates, Pamini and the others find the real way out, but only to discover that it doesn't lead to the real world, but to total deletion from the system. Amidst the glitches and abstractions, the group has to make a final decision. Keep existing inside the broken simulation or accept their consciousness to escape the trauma of the tent. The curtain falls, and for the first time, Caine loses control of the show. That's something for us to see and understand, because when we remember the past of the digital circus, we know that all the abstractions ended up in the basement. I think this mention is cool here because people are focusing a lot more on the exit, but the abstractions are on the loose, and we already imagined that, right? When the trailer came out, we saw the circus totally collapsing here, and we already imagined that the abstractions would end up on the loose, including Jax's, because we already imagined that he's going to end up going crazy here in the digital circus. Then comes this question. Man, Caine was actually protecting everyone from the abstractions that were breaking inside the digital circus, in his own way. but he was. Without him there, the abstractions are eventually going to come out that way. The thing is, since the circus is now darker and much gloomier, we can already imagine that the abstractions won't attack directly, because the environment is probably more suitable for them to stay calmer, since the light ends up attracting them to attack. Now, when we go back to the first episode where everything was starting, we have here the big finale where there's a fade out, right? They go out expanding to the end of the circus, right? Leaving through the tent, leaving through the void, and from there they go straight to the computer. I think this is really important because there's that soma theory where all the players of an incredible digital circus would literally be trapped with their digital copies inside their minds. Kaine, he has already said this several times that he made a perfect computer program to create bodies that are compatible with digitally copied minds. This isn't just an empty word. Besides that, the players have been there for many years. When Kingo was hacking Kaine to erase him from the digital circus, man, there was data there showing that Kaine was created in the 90s. Kingo has been there since 99. Jax, Pomini, and Hagata joined years later. Hagata has been there longer, but the difference between her time there and Kingo's is 8 years. So, Kingo lived there for 8 years before Hagata showed up. More than twice that amount of time has passed since other players joined the circus. So, it's impossible to imagine that a body could have stayed in a coma for so long and survived. And when we remember the beginning of episode 8 where an AI was being fed, and we can understand that this AI would be Kaine, this AI was creating things and evolving. But after receiving a lot of information, it started to go into a state of collapse. Why? It literally started to break down. It became chaotic, the shapes no longer made sense when it was trying to create new things in a more creative way, so it was imprisoned. And what happened is that it literally ended up absorbing another AI that was apparently improving. This AI could also involve the project that, Scratch at the beginning of the digital circus was creating in order to achieve a kind of digital immortality. The problem is that when Kaine, this first AI, breaks free and ends up absorbing Scratch's project, it ends up causing everything to collapse. She actually started trapping everyone inside these adventures of the circus, and she started to become chaotic. As we saw, Kaine was being completely chaotic towards the other players of the digital circus, using psychological manipulation and torturing everyone throughout each of these adventures. What happens is that this wasn't something he believed he was doing until the last episode we watched. But then, when he starts making everyone feel bad and all, we realize that this also ends up breaking and making the players go insane. The thing is, he wasn't perfect to be able to create these adventures. He was an extremely limited AI, even though he did a lot inside the circus, but he was really breaking down and making everyone turn into an abstraction. When the digital circus reaches this end, abstractions would pretty much be the most inevitable path for the digital circus. We saw that several players went in there, but apparently they went in and got stuck in the circus not because they wanted to, but because their data was thrown there due to the absorption by Kaine's AI, which was entering that network. He was surprised when Ragata entered because he believed that other players wouldn't be able to get in, so the program worked. So, when we hear in the synopsis that there really won't be a way out, and that everything could lead to the deletion of the digital circus program, man, this would be something really crazy because it's the kind of ending where you can imagine Jax being the last one left in the digital circus. And the other members would accept being deleted from the program because leaving would basically mean giving up. This could make total sense. Man, I want to remind you that in the pilot, when Pomini was out in the void, a place even Kaine can't handle, it's interesting because she was in a complete trance. This might not be exactly her connection to reality, but actually it could be her connection, or rather the state she would enter to go into a trance while her data starts being deleted. This would be interesting as an ending that wouldn't be so happy but would be tragic. Actually, Digital Circus is very likely to end by showing what happened to the humans in real life while the circus players end up dying, being erased. Maybe even the people, their real-life selves, will find out what happened to their players, their avatars, if the KSA still exists. Anyway, this is a supposed leak that we can take into consideration. From the poster where this little bee appears, maybe it's real. I look at this image and I start to believe it could be real. The little bee could be real. The bee has been there since the beginning of the digital circus. Caine, he is really fascinated by bees, and could he be reborn as a bee? Maybe, but limited so as not to torture the circus players. But he would only be there to try to delay the inevitable, which is the collapse of the digital circus. And believing that there is no way out is a possible ending. The Soma theory exists. That Netflix series The Hollow, which I talked about millions of years ago here on YouTube, man, it's possible for them not to have a happy ending. I think you better prepare yourself for that. I don't know if Glitch would release such a tragic ending for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens. Where no one can escape the circus, they live there long enough for each of them to go insane. And in the end, they end up getting stuck there and decide together to delete the digital circus so they can have freedom. When I remember this ending here where Ribbit talks about regretting something, so a lot of people found this very ambiguous. Ribbit is a character we know almost nothing about. We can even assume she worked for the CIA, but when she talks openly with Jax about escaping the circus, it's not about escaping, but about being able to regret something, for example. I don't know if talking to Jax, she's asking whether he really regrets something he did in real life. His past is also a mystery to us. But she could also be a character that we have theories about, that she might have actually worked inside the CIA. We can imagine that she was also one of the people partly responsible for getting the Scratch program up and running and recruiting new humans. Maybe she worked on this CIA project involving the digital cloning of minds for this environment, which indirectly ended up sending everyone to the circus. Maybe it could even be a little worse. Could it be that someone, some user or a CIA employee tampered with Caine's AI, making the two so close that one could absorb the other? Well, these are just possibilities. We'll see about that soon. By the way, let me tell you, I have to thank you for the messages from the last videos I recorded here with my voice totally messed up. Guys, thank you so much for all the support, but I'm alive, so it's going to get better. It's going to get much better, but I need to speak to you very clearly here, and I'll be very honest too. I prefer to work while I'm sick and keep working rather than, live knowing that I could have worked more and didn't. That's it.